Hello, I'm Tootight. Ding dong merrily, the glitter is flashing and the spirits are flowing, which can only mean one thing, that it's about 5 o'clock at the house of Lautrec. Or it could mean that it's the holiday season that's upon us as we speak. And what better time of year than now to listen to a drag queen talk about how to top off your list of gifts that you might consider giving to other people. Dear sweet Wilson Shugart has tagged me in the top 10 booktuber list, and I'm going to give you my top 10 books. Now, doing a top 10 list is somewhat difficult because how do you narrow down your absolute favorites? Well, I've decided to do the best thing that I could think of, which was to go the mathematical route and to present only the books that I've read 3 times or more, because I am a big rereader. And I figure once I've gotten a list of things that I've read 3 times or more, I'll pick from among those that are going to be my favorite. Now, not on my list are books like Lolita, Bleak House, In Cold Blood, well, Lolita by Nabokov, Bleak House by Charles Dickens, In Cold Blood by Truman Capote, and Anything by Flannery O'Connor, simply because I can't say for certain if I've read them more than 3 times. And in Flannery O'Connor's case, I may have read many of her stories 10 or 15 times, but I can't identify one particular collection that I've read consecutively 3 times in a row. So I'll be skipping over those. Now, I'll take my cue from the silken-haired Adam from Memento Mori, and when he presented his discussion on James Mustick's 1,000 Books to Read Before You Die, and instead of just presenting a dry list, I'll give you a little bit of an idea of why I think that they might be a good gift for somebody else that you love and cherish, and or would like to make just a soupçon smarter. Number 10 on my list is Charlotte's Web, which I can't find my copy of, but Charlotte's Web by E.B. White, and yes, E.B. White of Strunk and White. So if you've ever been in a classroom and assigned Strunk and White as your style guide, E.B. White knows a thing or two about language. And Charlotte's Web, although considered a child's book, is really, it's frightening, it's emotional, it's uplifting, and it's something that everyone should read, no matter what your age. So Charlotte's Web is the first on my list. The second on my list, well, actually number 9, because we're going in descending order, is, yes, James Joyce's Ulysses. Steve Donahue be damned. Now, I know I've just committed some sort of blasphemy in the booktuber universe by besmirching the name of Steve Donahue, but there was a point where he was doing if you happen to hear errant sounds like 10 lords a-leaping and 9 helicopters circling or 8 drug addicts squealing, just ignore it. It's just one of the things that we must bear with. So Steve Donahue did a read-along of the Odyssey and wondered what he could read next. And I thought, well, the next best thing would be, after reading the Odyssey, to read James Joyce's Ulysses, because you've got the groundwork laid for you, and so all you have to do is hop into this. But his response is that he's read Ulysses and didn't enjoy one word of it, which I just can't quite believe. Because, I mean, there's Leopold Bloom and he speaks about his curled conquistador, where the first sentence of the opening paragraph to Leopold's section, that Leopold Bloom ate with relish the inner organs of beasts and fowl, or Molly Bloom's soliloquy at the end, which is gorgeously written and just beautifully evocative. It's filthy, it's funny, and yes, it made me cry. I know it's not that hard to do if you've seen my channel. I go in for a tear or two every now and again, but it's the ending of the book, and it's really, really beautiful. Now, if you are going to give this to someone, I suggest that you give, along with it, Ulysses Annotated, Notes for James Joyce's Ulysses by Don Gifford. And yes, it's a bit of a struggle to read 2 books at once, but this edition, with this edition, each page has the line of the line numbers as if it were a huge poem, and it is sort of a huge poem. It's a hilarious huge poem, and it's a horrifying long poem, and it's just amazing. So this will give you an idea of what might be going on in Dublin at the beginning of the 20th century. And yes, it's slightly difficult, but it's absolutely worth it. I don't quite get, I mean, it's not really that difficult. Climbing Mount Everest is difficult. This you can do with a cup of tea or some hot chocolate spiked with some rum, who knows. It's not that difficult. It's worth it. This is my main selection for you, Ulysses. And if you think you're not smart enough, don't be stupid. Of course you're smart enough. It's wonderful. So that's number 9 on my list. I'm going to plop those down right here. Number 8 on my list is Winesburg, Ohio, which I've talked about before. If you've seen my openings, where I read the openings of things that I recommend for one reason or another, I read the first short story in Winesburg, Ohio, and it's absolutely lovely and also very emotional. Sherwood Anderson cuts right to the core of what it means to be human and the limitations that we all encounter. And it's just a gorgeous read. If you don't know it, or if you do know it and you think somebody else might like it, I recommend this as well. Okay, my next recommendation is Edie. It's an oral history of Edie Sedgwick, who was one of the superstars in Andy Warhol's factory scene in the early 60s, and it's an oral biography compiled by Gene Stein and edited by George Plimpton, the late editor of the Paris Review. And it's also incredibly interesting. If you are interested at all in the 1960s New York, if you're interested in art, if you're interested in lowlifes, drug addicts, drag queens, anything of that sort, the fringe of society who rise to the top, then I think this would be good for you. Edie Sedgwick was an incredibly troubled woman, and she died at the age of 27 or 28, and it's not necessarily a comfortable read, and you won't like a lot of the people in the book, but who says that you have to? You don't. You'll note that there are some people in here who are talked about not quite enough. Lou Reed, for one, is not spoken about enough for my liking. I would love a full discourse on the Velvet Underground scene at that time, but we got a little bit of it here, and Edie rubbed elbows with lots and lots of people. Edie. So good. Okay. Next, Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. Also part of my openings series, which if you haven't seen, I'll link my videos below so that you can maybe look at them, get a taste of it before you go out to shop, and you can see if it's for you. Now, while this is not a perfect book, I just recently gave this to somebody, a friend of mine, and she and I spoke about it, and it does suffer from what I call the 3/4 plague, which is that 3/4 of the way through the book, I think that there's a bit of a lag that occurs, and you sometimes get a sense that Ishiguro is attempting to wrap up the story, but I forgive that completely because the rest of it is done so well. It's creepy and beautiful and something that everyone should read. He's most known for Remains of the Day and other things, but this is the only one I've read so far, so it's the only one that I can recommend, but I recommend it highly. There's that. Next is Marilynne Robinson's Housekeeping, her first novel. And everyone goes on about Gilead. Yes, it won the Pulitzer Prize. By my estimation, this actually is her best book. This and maybe Lila, her last novel. But if you're going to read Robinson, you know, her essays are amazing, but this is her first novel, and it's like reading poetry. It's just beautiful. You'll love it. I recommend it completely. The next one is The Stranger by Albert Camus, which also appeared in my openings. You can see the link and follow it and listen to the first chapter and see if it's for you. Quite disturbing, quite beautiful. The Stranger by Albert Camus. And then one last one that I did a video, I read the opening few pages of, is 1984, George Orwell. A tragic love story. And that's how you should read it, as a tragic love story. Yes, it's about a world gone mad. Yes, there are political implications throughout, but if somebody told me that, I would think, what a boring book, and I'd pass it up immediately. This is a tragic love story and deserves to be read by anyone who has a heart. 1984. Okay. Now, I will just have to say to Adam, the silken-haired Adam from Memento Mori, that as Brandy and Monica said, the boy is mine. Okay, I know that you love John Cheever, and now that I do, I kind of love you a little bit more than I did before. But John Cheever's Big Red Book of Stories will give you a new reason to live. They're heartbreaking, and they're beautiful, and they're weird, and not all of them are perfect, but they're just so good. I mean, it's very non, you know, I'm not a very good literary critic, but dip into it. I took 1 year. At one point, I took a year. I had moved from one city to another, and I took this book with me. I was assigned it in college, and I had read one or two stories, and I thought, oh, okay, good for John Cheever. And I thought, well, I'll read through the whole thing and see what it's like. And it became every day. I allowed myself only one story. I gave myself a little treat every day, and no one's ever given me a better gift than I've given myself by reading John Cheever. And I go back to these stories over and over and over again, and they're exquisite. That's the word for them. They're exquisite. So if John Cheever's Big Red Book of Stories, put it on your list. And last but never least is Emma by Jane Austen, because it's my favorite of Jane Austen. So this is the tip of the Jane Austen iceberg. If you really love someone, you'll get them every Jane Austen novel, but if you just kind of like them or you've just met them, Emma will endear you to them immediately. She's bitchy, she's witty, she's caustic and observant. She's just my kind of girl. Jane Austen is hilarious, and I don't understand why she doesn't have well, I guess she does have a pretty big following, but I kind of thought it was kind of like a girly book, but I was wrong. It's an every person book. Jane Austen, and particularly Emma. So that is my list of top 10s, but I do have to add one more thing to the list. get yourself a really good edition of William Shakespeare's sonnets. And then you can follow along when I present the Shaky Sonnet show beginning at the beginning of 2019 in January. I'm going to be presenting every last one of Shakespeare's 154 sonnets, and you can choose whichever edition you like, whatever floats your boat. We'll talk about the differences between editions as we go along, but get yourself some Shakespearean sonnets, some Shakespeare sonnets, and follow along with me as we head into the new year with the Shaky Sonnet show at the beginning of January in 2019. Until then, while you're going through the mall, while you're listening to the carols, while you're lighting your menorahs, pay attention to the world, because it is full of wonder. And perhaps this is a cliched time of year to think about the wonder in the world, but any time of year that brings wonder to light is a good time of year. It should be every part of your day. Go out, pay attention, come back again in January for the Shaky Sonnet show. I'm Tootight. Mwah.